Here's a quick exercise just to kind of get you used to the mechanics of mounting a microphone. Every single microphone has a weird, unique way of mounting to a stand, which means you just want to take your time to figure out what in the world the designer had in mind before you try to make it work. And then take a little more time and figure out what the best way to put it on the stand is. What's the best way to go about putting it on the stand so that I don't drop the thing? This is a weird little Audio-Technica mic. It screws into the stand right here. And then it's got this little adjustable pivot point that lets you adjust the microphone. And so sometimes it makes sense to loosen up the pivot point and try to figure out how you want to thread it onto the stand with it loose so that you can move it all over the place. A lot of folks will just leave it locked down wherever it happens to be, and it might be locked down in a terrible place for trying to put it on the stand. For my purposes, I'm going to make sure the stand is more or less stable. It shouldn't be in any weird contortions or crazy angles. It should be very, very vertical and straight up and down and very stable. So we'll talk a little bit more about where the stand should be in just a second. I kind of like the idea of folding this guy back on himself and then tightening him up a little bit, because then I can hold it like this and put it right on top of the stand. And now I'm going to use two hands to make sure that as I twist it, it is never in danger of dropping. And this thing doesn't even want to thread on very well at first. You know, it takes multiple tries to get it to bite. And you can't let go until you know that it has threaded at least 3 or 4 times on. Then once it's bit, you don't have to hold it quite so carefully. But you got to know that it has locked in before you can actually just start spinning it like this. And then I'm going to go all the way till it's tight. And now it's on there. I can loosen up this bolt a little bit and adjust the microphone and the stand to where the mic is pointing up the way I want it to point. So that seems pretty simple, but it's actually it's a challenge with every new microphone. Just figuring out how to put it on the best and being patient enough to do that. Now we're going to talk about actually running the cable and how to set up your mic stand. One thing to notice is that this boom arm is not boomed out at a really crazy radical angle, and it's also in line with one of the legs here of the mic stand, which means as the weight of the mic is leaned out on the boom, it's leaned out in a direction that is not going to want to tip over. If I were to lean it out between the legs, it's much more likely to want to tip over. So we always line the boom up with one of the legs, and that's just standard operating procedure. The microphone stand will usually have a couple of knobs and twists on it. Here is the lever for loosening up the boom arm itself, so I can do things like this with it. And then I'm going to tighten that guy back up. And then this little knob here tightens and loosens to allow the boom to telescope in and out. I can loosen him up and telescope in and out. Most of the time you will have a little clip on a mic stand that looks something like that. And it just latches on to the mic stand, and it leaves a little place for the cable to be snugged up against the stand. So let's talk about cables really quick. I'm going to take the female end of my cable and snap it into the microphone here. I can do that without even looking because the mic cable has a little slot that's supposed to line up with the slot in the microphone. And so once I rotate it around and find the slot, it snaps right in there. I would always recommend leaving some slack at this point. So whether you're using your mic clip or maybe you're using some gaff tape. Gaff tape is not duct tape. It is actually way more expensive and way better. And in this case, if I leave a little slack like that, and I put my gaff tape on here, if anything crazy were to happen, and the mic were to drop for some reason off the end here, I've got a little safety net bungee cord here. This slack also lets me adjust the mic without having to re-tape down the cable or loosen things up. So, I have my slack there, I run my cable down to the bottom, and I'm always going to leave a couple of loops of extra slack at the bottom of the cable too, the bottom of the stand that is, so that I can move the stand around. You don't want to tape this guy down with no slack at all, because if something happens and I have to move it around, I've got to undo my taping job. So this is a great idea. Slack here and slack here, and then, you know, keeping your boom arm lined up with your leg of your stand. That is pretty much what a appropriate professional mic stand technique is supposed to look like. The last thing we're going to talk about here is coiling up our cable. So once we're done, I will take my tape off here, push the little button at the bottom, at the end of my mic cable in, which releases the cable. And now it's time to put the cable up. You never just grab a cable, you never just grab it and start wrapping it around your elbow like it's a rope. Cables have usually been coiled one particular way before. And so the best thing that you can do is guess a reasonable loop size, and then see if you can't start to let the cable coil itself. Try to twist the cable a quarter turn between your fingers as you do the loops, and one way or the other it should try to wrap itself back up. And even if you get things twisted, you can always untwist them, untangle them, and make sure that as you're coiling your cable, you're doing it gently and in a way that does not put stress on the cable or tear it up. You just don't want that thing torn up. Now, once it gets all nice and smooth and coiled up, some people will do this deal where they'll throw the end around itself a little bit, and then they'll snap the two cables together, and that kind of holds it together. That's one way to do it. I actually prefer to put a tiny strip of gaff tape, usually the same one that I used on the mic stand, because it doesn't leave any residue unless you just leave it there for like a year, and that'll hold it together nice and clean as well. So there you go, proper mic stand, mic mounting, and cable technique.